On this beautiful Memorial Day weekend, thank you all for showing up. I'm Mark Hennessy, the Executive Director of Chik-Wauk and the Gunflint Trail Historical Society. What an exciting day for our first ever Artist in Residence program. So we're going to get to that in just a second. Chik-Wauk is not open for the second year in a row. Yesterday was supposed to be our big opening. It's a little bit underwater still, even though it's the fire department says it's about as dry as you could possibly get out there. But we have a little bit of flooding going on again. But we think it's going to go down quickly, so we certainly would invite you back. We have a full summer of programs, every week. We've got Lonnie Dupree coming, just some spectacular Dick Powell doing storytelling. So a lot of different events. Check out, if you did not get our newsletter, make sure you talk to Bonnie. She's got a few extras. We got those. So a full slate of activities this summer. We got a new temporary exhibit opening up, and we have a new trapper's cabin exhibit that is opening up as soon as the water recedes enough to finish building our stairs there. So new things to see and do there. And I am pleased to introduce Renee Block, who's on our board of trustees and has done a fantastic job of getting things set up. She has been the leader in many ways of this work and this project and getting things launched and figuring things out. There's a lot of moving parts to this, and she can maybe talk a little bit. Yeah, she's like, oh yeah, there's a lot of moving parts, including water damage where the artist is supposed to stay because of ice dams. Anyone have ice dam problems this year? Yeah. So thank you to Renee, and she's gonna kind of kick us off.
Well, I need my cheat notes here. So just a few words before Jack, I introduce Jack. So this is just some brief notes on what we're trying to do with the Artist in Residency program. And we see it as a really good match for the mission and vision of the Gunflint Historical Society. Oh, thank you. Better. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the program, the details of the program. We hope to do a call for artists next year, but we hope to do 2 residencies in the fall. And we're just not exactly sure what the shape of those residencies will be. This is Jack painting at the Seagull Rapids. Okay, I have thank yous to do. First of all, this kind of thing takes a lot of people. And this is a generous community in many ways. So first of all, the Artist in Residency Task Force is our brainchild, Bill Douglas, Kim Gordon, and Kim Dayton. I don't think Kim Dayton's here, is she? No? She's lives on Onagon. And they were the people who we consulted and met many, many times. And they're the energy behind this. I also consulted with Scott Anderson and Neil Sherman and Ruth Pizarro at the Art Colony. White Pine Lodge and Gunflint Lodge generously donated 2 meals for Jack and sugar for photography. Bonnie Schutte and Kathy Landy and Sherilyn Morrison for their gifts. Larry and Jim Block installed studio lights at the Cross Creek House. Bill and Sue Douglas made that wonderful sign out by the trail. The board, we couldn't do anything without our board, without Mark. And of course, members. Members are the important lifeblood of this group. So here's a great picture that Ann took of Jack at the Rapids painting on one of the sunny days. Jack hails from St. Paul. He is attracted to many subjects: landscape, still life, portraiture, figural work. He also does bronze work. Jack's been practicing this art of plein air painting for 20 years. And when Bill and I interviewed Jack, we found him to be so easygoing, and this came to work out to our advantage because the house had many problems. We didn't know if we were going to be able to house him or not. We were looking for alternatives, and we said, you do know that May can be dicey up here. And when he arrived on May 5th, there was still snow and ice, and it rained, and the skies were gray. But by the end of his time here, the sun did come out, and I'm just astonished. And Jack's going to talk more about what plein air painting is, but he did all of this work in that period of time. So, and I believe he painted everything outside for the most part. So, and one more thing, Jack has just returned, so his residency was over on the 15th. Then he went back to the Twin Cities. Then he went to Denver. Then he came back on Friday and drove here. So he's really given us a gift of coming back for this presentation. Jack, Dant.
Switch over programs real quick here.
Yep.
Excuse me. Okay.
Jack, can you run that in the not preview mode? We'll record better.
It is not in the preview.
That right there is,
Okay.
is the.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is a really beautiful day, and I know it's hard to come inside on a day like today, on a holiday weekend. So I really appreciate you all being here. It's been quite an experience, quite an event, and I have a lot of things to share with you today. Hopefully time won't go too long. If there's enough time, I'll do a quick demo just to show the process a little bit. But I'd like to keep this fairly informal. If there's something that you see that you really want to ask about, just please raise your hand, let me know, and we can talk about it. So this is here, I'm here for you to tell you about this amazing experience that I've just had. And so with that, why don't we get started? This was as you've heard, this is the first experience of the Gunflint Trail Artist Residency. And I really am looking forward to seeing how this unfolds in the future. Let's see, does this work?
You want me to?
Well, I'm hoping it can work. It worked before from a distance. Let's try this. Okay, so I also have a big list of thanks. There's a lot of crossover there. Maybe it doesn't like to be. Oh, you know what? I'll bet you. Let's try this. That work? There we go. Okay, now it's working. So the Gunflint Trail Historical Society, thank you so much for envisioning this, creating it, coming up with this whole concept, and making it happen. Also, whoa, this is going to get better.
Just cue me.
There we go.
I'll do it.
The hosts, Renee and Bill, have just been tremendous. They've done so much work to support this, to check in with me, to give me updates, and it's just been incredible the amount of work that I know that you've done behind the scenes. Where's Bill? Oh, thank you. Okay, there's Bill. These two have just put a tremendous amount of work in, so thank you for that. Let's see. Bonnie, campus director, done a tremendous amount of work, I'm sure, behind the scenes that I didn't even know about, but it's been great to see all the work that you do here. Mindy and John Frederickson of Gunflint Trail, as I mentioned, I had a wonderful meal there one evening, and it was just great to have them be open to supporting this program as well at the Gunflint Lodge. And that was the meal. Beautiful. It was fantastic. It was a great walleye dinner. And then Chris and Allison Short of Pine Ridge Lodge, they also hosted me for one of their fantastic pizzas there. It's great to get to know them. And what was really cool is as I was sitting there at having dinner and pizza, Mindy and John were also at the bar and figured it out, and we had a really good connection. So that was pretty neat. Also, Kathy and Scott Anderson for recommending me. All this support is just really appreciated. So today's talk, we're going to cover a lot of different things. Go through a typical day and what the overall experience was. I imagine you have in your minds what this kind of an experience might be, and I did too, but then other things happened. And so it'll be kind of fun to share this with you. An overview of the work. You've got the work here, but I'll have you have some pictures to show kind of what it looks like in the process. Then, since, I don't know, how many of you are painters or artists? Okay, 2, good. All right, so there's a cool history having to do with the whole history of plein air painting that I'm going to just give you a brief overview of, just to let you know how did I get to where I got to. And then if there's time, I'd like to give you a little demo of the painting process and then follow it up with a conclusion. Come on in, welcome. And so let's move on. This is me. So as you heard in the introduction, I'm from St. Paul. I'm a medical device product development engineer as my day job, but because of my love of art, I've been doing this for 20 years, I've been kind of slowly backing out of that. Now I'm 3/4 time, and I'm gonna ride that for a while and see how that goes, but I've really appreciated the ability to have more time opening up for painting, which enabled this type of event as well. I've been in St. Paul for quite a long time, and I do have a family history of painting. My mom is a painter, and she used to teach art classes in the basement. And then it turns out that my great-grandpa's half-sister was an amazing painter, and I have 2 of her paintings. And way back in California, way back. And it's pretty amazing to have that experience and have that family history. In fact, in July in St. Paul, we have a family event, a family art show where my mom's got paintings, my sister does jewelry, and my brother does photography. So it's kind of a fun gathering at Boreal, if you're familiar with that. These are some paintings that I've done in the past. Let's see if I can get back. Well, okay, there we go.
Back.
All right, so my artistic lineage is kind of fun to think through. When you look at history and all of the influences of all the people, I can trace mine back to Paris in the 1880s, which is really kind of the beginning of some of this painting that we're seeing. Frank Vincent Dumont in Paris was teaching the art students. He taught Arthur Maynard, brought her over to the New York side. Arthur Maynard taught Al Albert, who then taught John Osborne in New Jersey at the Ridgewood Art Institute. This is where my instructor came in. He's a New Jersey born guy, spent all of his years growing up there, and he stumbled into the studio and started taking classes. That's where he learned about this prismatic palette that I use, and learned quite a bit from John Osborne. Then Joe went on to do a number of things, but he's been a professional artist and an amazing teacher for 30 years, just teaching hundreds of people, many of which have become professional artists. So I'm really indebted to Joe and his friendship. I studied with him for 11 years in St. Paul, and now we are friends, and he's continuing to teach workshops all over, but he's just taught me a tremendous amount. I've also studied with some other people, but Joe's been my primary landscape instructor. And here I am. So my hopes and expectations for the week. As I went through this kind of coming up to the week, I was just like, well, all right, what do I want to get out of this? And one of the most important things was I was looking forward to having a whole week of being immersed in nature. And if you're up here, you probably can relate to that, because it's an amazing place to be immersed in. And I don't get that opportunity as much. And so it was a pretty cool thing to look forward to. And I was hoping to work in multiple types, multiple mediums as I went through the week. I primarily paint in oils, watercolor, a little etching, maybe even a little sculpture. So as the week turned out, not surprisingly, I concentrated mostly on oils because there was an urgency to try to get them finished and take on another one. And I'm most comfortable in oils. And so I feel like I can make the most out of a scene using oils. However, you'll see that I did do one etching, or two, one worth showing. So as that worked out, another thing I was hoping this week, I thought, well, I've got a whole week. I've never done a bread starter. So my time is flexible. And so I said, let's do that. And so I have this really good book, Flour, Water, Salt, Yeast, and it talks you through the process. And I made a bread starter over the course of about 5 days using northern yeast, yeast from the air up here. So that was kind of cool. I also wanted to do some fitness activities, just in the sense of being out here hiking and a little bit of running and that kind of thing. And that was nice easy to combine because I carry a pretty good sized backpack, and so that always involved fitness when I was doing a hike. I was often hiking to a hiking spot. Meeting locals, meeting all of you, meeting the volunteers, the people at the restaurants. That was certainly part of it. And then just getting to know this area. I've been coming up here since I was a kid, but never spent this much time at one time. So for all of you who have places up here, either part-time or full-time, it's I really see what you're up here for. It's really wonderful. Here's the bread. It's a little flat, but it tasted good. So it's only going to get better. It's got great potential. So what's a typical day for me? Typical day is fighting against your mouse. Would you mind?
I'm trying to guess.
You're trying to keep it? Okay,
Trying
I'll
to
just put this away.
Just stick your hand out.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you. So the first day, the first part of the day, I'd always start with my starter. I would throw away 3/4 of it, add 500 grams of water, 500 grams of flour, wheat flour, and mix it all up and then wait till it mixes. So let's move on. And then, of course, the weather was a big part of my day. All of these paintings were done on location, on life. I was hoping to get more time in the studio working on them when I got home, but time didn't allow me to do that with my then travel to Denver. And I needed a couple of weeks for them to dry anyway because of the varnishing process. So what you see here is what I did on location. Usually what I would try to do is, as the sun came out, I would paint, because it's a big difference painting in a gray day versus a sunny day, or even partially sunny day. So wherever I could, I tried to paint in the sun. If it was raining, I would hike, or if it was cloudy, I would search for other locations that might be good potential places. I did a lot of driving up and down the trail, so much so that I had to go back. And my schedule typically was I would get up, I would do a painting in the morning, I would do a little lunch, and then do a painting in the afternoon. It's better to paint in the morning and afternoon because the light is more interesting. If it's above you, the shadows are really kind of flat and they're not cast. The light is less beautiful and less warm when it's directly above you as well. So for lots of reasons, it's better to paint in the morning and the afternoon or evening. And so that's what I tried to do as much as I could. And then several times you'll see as I go through the process that I painted, you'll see that I didn't get to finish a painting in one setting. And so I would come back to it if it rained or if the timing didn't work out right. And so that's what's great about a thing like this, and some competitions too. As long as the conditions are similar enough, you can go back and you can pick it right up. Oil paints are very forgiving in that way. If they're a little dry, that's fine. You just paint over them. You scrape them off, it's fine. So all of those things work out really well. And then I did do a few etchings. That was something that if you're not familiar with an etching, it actually starts with a copper plate. And so there's this prepared copper plate that has a ground on it, basically kind of a mask made with a rosin. And so I came up with some prepared copper plates and took some images. I could have done this from life. I did it in the house that I was staying in because it was a little easier to control, and I'm just very new at this. And so I did a couple etching, drawing in through that masking area. And then when I brought it back home, I did the dipping in acid for certain amounts of time. The longer you dip it, the bigger the gap it makes, the bigger the groove it makes, and therefore the more ink it forms. And so you'll see an image of it later, and you're welcome to take a look at these. I'm really, really new at this. I've got a really good friend that has been my mentor, but so I thought this would be kind of a fun one to try to lead into that. And then dinners, evenings were either at the house on my own or at the places, the lodges I talked about, or that's hosted also by Renee and Jim. So I had a lot of experiences, and that I thought this talk would be mostly about experiences, but then turns out there's more things to talk about. But I certainly want to let you know about the experiences that I've had. It's really been a big mix. As you heard, when I got here, it was winter. When I left, it was summer. So it was a huge mix. When I did some of my hikes, they were in a lot of snow and ice, and so it was great. The clouds were a little discouraging at first, but if I was patient, then it broke open. I didn't know if it was going to be a full week of clouds, but either way, it worked out just fine. And animal encounters, boy, you got a lot of pet grouse around here. It's incredible. Walking right up and saying hi to them, and they just walk around, and it was really sweet. I thought about trying to paint them. When I was painting, this painting right over here, looking across the lake at the Chik-Wauk Museum, there were these northern right in the shallows, and I thought at first it was an otter or something because they were making such a racket. And then I saw the fin up there. They were just digging in there, and so that was really cool to see. I hadn't seen that before. Beaver, there's a beaver dam, big beaver dam and lodge in this beaver pond very close to where I was staying, right next to the Cross River. And I went by there probably 4 times a day and often just stopped and took a look at what's happening. And you'll see this little painting right here shows where there was still ice in the lake. It's early, the first couple of days, there was still some ice there. And I caught that one quickly because I could tell it was going fast. And sure enough, by the 3rd day, it was completely ruined. And so this was as much capturing the season as anything. And that's why that was kind of a small. You can see there next to my boot track, I've been told it's a wolf track. It felt like a wolf track because it was fresh, and I was walking the trail and I was going the same direction. So I was having a little song with, I don't know, imagine that they were watching me, I'm not sure. Lots of good hiking in. I did see a little glimpse of a northern light, tried to capture it with the photo there. So that was pretty cool. I kept watching for more, but it was fun to see it a little bit. And then of course the dinners, and an amazing time when there was very few mosquitoes. The last day, I had a couple of mosquitoes popping up. For the most part, not so bad. And then, just going back, this down here on the left was a site I hadn't seen before. As I was cloudy days, so I was driving around looking for things to paint, and it was such a cool experience. If you can see right here, there's fog here, and it was actually blowing across the lake and like piling up on this end of the lake. And it was the coolest thing. I got a little video of it, but I didn't really show it. But just to be there and to experience that was really exciting. There we go. Great. And then to have the extremes, this quietness of being at the beaver pond and watching the sunset, it's just beautiful, versus that painting, standing next to that rapids, and it was thunderous. I mean, I was like, do I need to have hearing protection? It was like being at a rock concert and doing 3 hours of that versus this quiet. It was fun to have that kind of variety within the same week. I went to Grand Marais, met us with some friends. Elise Kylo was a good friend of mine. We did a little bit of hiking in this area. We actually brought paints, and we were kind of thinking we would paint from there, but the fog, it just kind of didn't make sense because you do this painting and you say, what is that? And so just turned into a nice hike. And Neil Sherman, another good friend that lives in Grand Marais, I was able to connect with him a little bit or say hi when I went down to get more gas. And then, another experience was this self-induced pressure. I just wanted to make the most of this. And so I was always kind of trying to push, get another little bit more time on a painting. And so that was a reality of the experience. I didn't relax, per se. Opening day was on Saturday just before I left, and so I actually got out and caught a fish. And then just going into town. It's part Volunteers, my gosh, this place is just bustling with volunteers, and I'm so impressed and thankful. I mean, I'm new to here, but the amount of work that these volunteers do, and I just interfaced with Renee and Jim and Bill and Sue and Larry and Kathy and Ann and Bonnie, and all of you are so active and generous with your time. And I'm sure there are 4 times as many volunteers that I could list, but I didn't meet you. So thank you for all of the work you do. This is an amazing place that you're keeping going. So it's awesome. So let's get into the work a little bit. As you can see, it started out kind of cold. The first day I was looking around for things to do, and I did a painting in the gray because that's what I had to work with. Hiked to the top of the bluff above Gunflint Trail, or above Gunflint Lake, I'm sorry. And it was a little rough, but well, you get what you get, right? And that was when I met the tracks from. Then later that day is when I caught the little beaver pond, and that was great to be able to capture that. I don't know, I might lose track of the days. This is days 1 through 3. I also was going to go get started on a painting, this one over here of the Chik-Wauk Museum, but the winds were a little strong, and so I couldn't quite have my gear up there. If I went over to the other side of the bluff, I could capture this one. So that's a bluff painting across. And then there was this little hidden falls that intrigued me. And I got to start on there, but then the clouds came in and it changed the scene, and so I decided I'll let that go and come back to it. And it was good I did. You can see I kind of got it blocked in, but it wasn't complete by a long shot. Great. So days 4 and 5, I went to get started on the painting of the Chik-Wauk Museum. It started out pretty sunny in the morning. I wanted to capture that. I specifically wanted a morning painting because of the way that the light was hitting the building. And even by the time I got this done, you can see the light was gone, so it wasn't hitting the building there. But I do this underpainting, and that allows me to capture the shadows and the light. And so even if it goes away, I can still keep working. So I would have kept working, except that it turned into rain. The clouds turned into rain, and so I just thought, oh, okay, I'll back it all up. But you see that little umbrella up there? You often see those with painters, with the whole plein air process. And they actually serve more so the purpose of blocking the light, blocking the sun, because you don't want to have the sun directly on either your work or where you're mixing. And if you can keep it off of you, that's all the better too. If it does rain, it's a pretty small umbrella, and you kind of have to be like right in close to get much protection. But it does keep the rain off your panel if you need to. I painted in the rain and the snow and the sleet and all sorts of things, but it's just kind of tougher on it. So I backed it all up. And then you can see I went back to the next day. Went back to the falls. It was a nice sunny day. That was in the afternoon, I think, of that day. It opened up, and I got to finish the falls painting. That was great. And then the next morning, there was enough sun to go back to this painting of the museum, and I got to finish that. And then 6 and 7. So there was this rock. You may, as an artist, you see things, and you get in this habit of seeing shadows and seeing light and color and all sorts of stuff. And it's kind of a blessing and a curse, but so I'm always looking for stuff, whether I'm on a painting trip or not. But this rock caught my eye a lot, and so I wanted to get back there. I was waiting for the right conditions. So I was able to do that one in one shot. And then this, of course, these amazing falls were incredible. Let's see, maybe I didn't mention that. Can you go back one slide? Nope. Okay, that's all right. So the falls was actually 2 sessions. I must have missed one of the earlier ones. I got started on it, and the clouds came over, and those falls have so much light bouncing off of them that I really wanted to have that light, and it needed to be in the afternoon. The morning light was a different light, and so that was a two session painting as well. Thank you, Anne, for the photos of this here. And then this was another one that I was looking around, looking for things to do, and found that down below the Laurentian Divide parking lot, there's a trail that takes you down to the water, And you can see it was still very iced over, it was starting to come out. Learned about that thing where as the ice breaks apart, you get to take the ice from there and that becomes your first drink for the years. Yeah, I didn't do that. So, all right, great. Okay, there we go. Yeah, that's my fish. It's actually a snake northern, but it's, you know, when it swings close to the camera, hey, what can I do? So, and then the last day I did some hiking on the Centennial Trail and ended up on the area where you're overlooking, there's a couple of beaver ponds. There was a channel through the rock that the railroad used to go through. It's a small railroad. And my understanding is that that was used for a moment and then it was abandoned. And so for some reason, I like rocks and walls of rock and dirt. And so I started on a painting. I gotta say, there's more I would like to do on it, but that's as far as I got. Okay, so this is the etching that came out of it, very quick. It's pretty simple, that process that I talked through. Once you get done burning the plate, then you do a process of inking it. You ink it, you wipe it out, you wipe as much of the ink off as you can, leave the stuff only that's in the grooves. Then you take some wetted piece of paper, you put it in your press, put the paper on there, and you roll it through, and then that transfers it. And then when you do another one, you do the same process over. You re-ink it, re-wipe it, and I have a lot to learn about this process, but it was really cool to get a start. Now, can you tell which painting that's of?
Yeah.
All right, great. Yeah, Chik-Wauk Museum. So that was, and then the other weird thing is you have to do it in reverse. So, but with modern technology, I took a picture and I flipped it. So that just helped me a little bit. So if you have any questions about that process later on, I'd be happy to walk you through it. So what is plein air painting? Has anybody heard the term plein air? Oh, great, many of you, good. Okay, it's a French term. It turns out, I was just in Colorado last week for a big convention, 600 plein air painters from all over the country and the world. This guy from France was there, and he was giving a talk. He said, you know, the French didn't actually use the word plein air. What? There's magazines, and there's a whole world about that. But no, they would use the term sur le motif, in front of the motif, or in front of the scene. That was more what they did, how they would describe it in the past. But apparently now they're picking up plein air. Plein air basically means open air. And so there are eggs that are plein air eggs and things like that. So let's go ahead. But what's great about that is it's a direct connection with your subject, which is nature, in a way that working from photos or imagine just can't even touch. It's just so different, which is the joy of being up here in an experience like this. That is a direct connection with nature. We use all of our senses. We're not just looking at something. We're smelling it. We're feeling the air. We're slapping the mosquitoes. We're, all of the things, the wind. Oftentimes the mosquitoes, they get stuck to your painting. So, and that's the best way to really get immersed and capture the day. If you come away from the painting and you have a painting that looks like the way the day felt, then that's a win. And so hopefully when you look at some of these things, you get a little bit of a chill when you see that lake ice. Because some of those paintings, well, this one right here, I was standing on it, and within the course of the couple hours that I was working on it, I went from, wow, really warm, to this cold air coming across the lake and freezing me, and I put another shirt in. And so it's this big mix. But yeah, to be able to capture and paint the day is a big goal. Also, being immersed in the experience is really the best way to learn and to communicate through painting. And I learned that certainly in this one. When you're doing something as complicated as a waterfall or water in general, waves crashing in or something like that, to take a photo of it and do a painting of it, yes, you can do it, but it's nowhere near as powerful and rich, and you're not going to learn from that other than standing in front of it and watching this water come through, watching patterns that flow, what the light looks like as the water is being hit by it. Just nothing close. So to be able to stand in front of this was really the way to do that, and I continue to do that. Okay. And then, you know, any other plein air painter, when you ask them about a painting they've done from life, they'll be able to tell you the story because it's in them. They'll be able to say, yeah, I remember sitting at this one. It was a cloudy day, and then it broke open, and I tried to figure out what my light conditions were going to be. But there's always a story that comes with it because they had that experience. I don't paint with earbuds. I don't paint with sunglasses. In fact, oftentimes I take my glasses off because the little coating on here changes the color of the green. And, be careful about that. So switching gears a little bit, just to give you some background of where this all started. A lot of things happened in the 1800s. And one of the big things was this breakaway and this idea of starting to paint from life. Now, I will say this is from a Eurocentric viewpoint. I'm sure lots of other cultures have traditions of painting from life, drawing from life. I didn't do the research into those groups, so this is kind of specifically talking to this type of painting. And so John Constable was kind of one of the first people to break away and start painting from life. And that inspired other painters to go and do the same. So there was a group of people that went down to southern France through the Fontainebleau forest and started painting there, and they became known as the Barbizon School. Other people heard about this, they went down to join them, and they grew, and you can see over the 40-year span that they were there. And then in 1841 was a huge development that really helped things a lot. This guy, actually an American, John Rand, invented putting paint into tubes. Mm-hmm. And so you could bring your paints along instead of mixing them all. And then, you know, what do you do? We would put them into pig bladders before. So you can imagine the convenience of that. And so it just made it a lot easier to go out. Of course, you've all heard of the Impressionists, and they also were another group that came out in the mid to late 1800s. Late 1800s was Joe's sons used to call it the 1800s. And the Impressionists also painted from life. They took things even further, really concentrating on the impression of what happens when light hits it, what happens when shadow hits it. Oftentimes shadows were purple, lights were yellow, and things were exaggerated, and they were playing with combinations of how different colors affect your eye. Not so worried about drawing, things like that. But then also happening at the same time, late in the 1800s and into the 1920s, artist colonies were popping up all over Europe, and then also into the US and Germany and Russia. And so these artist colonies were groups of people that said, hey, I want to paint, you know, these historic sites, or the people that have these cool costumes because it's different than what we have. And they're still doing the traditional way. And so things were popping up all over France and Germany and Great Britain. And so this is a great book, The Good and Simple Life. Reads, it talks through, it's a wonderful history of many of these colonies that popped up. Makes me want to be there. So, and then the early and late 1800s in the US, the Hudson River School, of course, came out. Now, the US did things a little bit differently. They didn't necessarily go through this same period of big, deep impressionism. They did a little bit more of academic and combining some of the academic painting of really careful drawing, deep atmospheric things, but then taking some of the principles that were discovered during the Impressionists, by the Impressionists. And so they got a little bit of both. So you get this American Impressionism that was evolving out of that. California was a big source of that. And of course, this is in the late 1880s, 1920s. You can see some of the people that were involved in that. Some of them probably look pretty familiar to you. What was great about American Impressionism was that combination of great drawing and yet not exaggerated color, but learning what happens when color hits all these things. That went on fairly strong until the Depression hit and postmodern. And so those things, modernism came in, and then it kind of went away for a while. But then somehow it came back again in the 80s, and everybody was plein air painting and doing impressionism and so then since the 80s, you know, it's been back again, and now we have a conference of plein air painters that has 600 people in it. So it's kind of amazing. These are some of the people that I love. Some of their work. I could do a whole slideshow on that, but John Singer Sargent, American, did watercolors and oils, portraits, landscape, everything. It's incredible. Isaac Levitan is a Russian painter, very dour. You won't see any picture of him other than this very somber time. But for only living to be 40 years old, he did this gorgeous, very color. The tones were just perfect and drawing, and really, really cool. Edgar Payne painted a lot in the Southwest. He has some connections to Minnesota, and then Joaquin Sorolla out of Spain. He just did brilliant, huge paintings, often of boats and portraits, children playing on the beaches. This painting right here is a new one at the MIA, or MIA as we're calling it. And it's, must be 14 feet wide. It's incredible. So if you haven't been there for a while, it's pretty cool. I just saw it. Great. And then Minnesota. We do have, of course, a history of plein air painting and painting from life. Back in the early 1860s time, it was more about recording history than it was about making art. And so you saw that with some of the explorers, the military, like Seth Eastman and George Catlin. This group, it was beautiful art, but it's because that's how they were doing this. They were going and exploring and recording what they saw so they could bring it back. But then as you go further into the late 1800s, into the early 1940s, we also have Impressionism here too. So I'm not going to go through all the list of the 27 people that were listed in this book, but it's a great book. This Rena Newman Cohen has written many art books, and she's a fantastic author. This is just one of them listed here. So she's been a great contribution to the artistic scene here, and also in the sense that her sons are the Coen brothers. So another contribution to the artistic scene. It's pretty cool. So, all right, great. So another one. How many people have heard of Don Kestner? Anybody? Great. All right. Thank you. Don Kestner is a Minnesotan that has that worked for many years, just very quietly making art. He had his family. He was 1923 to 2009, born in St. Paul. Of course, like most people, discouraged from doing that professionally, but he couldn't help it. This is what he wanted to do. He was inspired by Walden to live a very simple life, so he did that. He built a small cabin, and he painted along the Mississippi River down by Hastings. And he just made a life that way. He ended up getting married, having kids. They moved to Silver Bay here. In fact, his daughter is still up in the Duluth area. And so it's a really inspirational story for a man that was just so committed to his art. He just continued to do this. And here's a couple of images of some of his work. In fact, if you go to the Tetagooch State Park, the big state park building there, if you ask real nice, they might let you into the conference room. They have about 5. This one thesis 6. And so that's him working on this slide. Okay, I guess that was it. Okay, so how are we doing? We're doing all right. The craft of plein air. I want to give you a little bit of an insight into what is involved in making a plein air painting. You're probably picking up bits and pieces of it as I've talked through here. But so some of the differences of working out from life versus in the studio. We're not copying. It's a very different thing to, instead of saying, well, let's see, this is what it looks like. It starts at that corner and goes down there. And you don't have the ability to copy because your subject moves and changes, and light changes, and there's all these things that are happening at the same time. So you take a much more active role in that process of art making. You make a lot of decisions that a camera makes a lot of decisions. In fact, one of these guys, Al Albert or somebody, called the camera the one-eyed liar. It just gives you what it gives you, and then you work with it. So in this situation, it's up to me to make decisions. And what I'm trying to do is simplify nature, distill it down to what it is that I feel is important and I want to communicate to you. Now, I'm pretty much of a realist. I try to stay pretty close to what I have, what's in front of me, because I think that that's pretty beautiful. Other people take different approaches to it. That's great. That's their style. I keep kind of going back to this. You can certainly, if I see something that's inspirational to me, then I want to paint that. If somebody tells me I should paint this over here and I'm not inspired by it, probably not going to be as good of a painting. And so that's why it's great to be able to have time to walk through. But sometimes it's as simple as a really cool light shadow or a shadow casting off of a garbage can. And that is inspirational because there's a great shape on the shadows. And so it doesn't mean that it always has to be gorgeous nature. It can be something very different. Right? And then, of course, we're taking a three-dimensional scene, and we're making it two-dimensional. And so that's in itself is a challenge, just to manage that whole thing. And then, of course, you've got changing light, you have bugs, you got rain, you got sleep, all those things that are a factor. And as you've seen, there's lots of ways you can handle it by stepping away, coming back, saying that's it, or changing your painting. So those are options too. I didn't mention, but on one of these paintings, I started it with one light scene that the first day, and I had the clouds, and then the next day it was a better sky, so I scraped it out and I painted that new sky. So you always have that option. Yeah. Okay, so equipment. As you can see here, this is my typical plein air painting setup. It's very lightweight because it all fits in that backpack. Lightweight is a relative term. The paints are kind of heavy. I haven't actually weighed it, but it gets to be enough when you do a long hike. But the point is that it's portable and you can set up easily and tear down easily, like if the rain kicks in. But you have everything you need to be able to be portable and carry everything with you. So I'll pass this around. This is a typical panel. It's linen bonded to a structure. This one happens to be a foam core. What's really great about it is it's lightweight, so I can carry a bunch of them with me. The light doesn't shine through it, and it stays really straight. Sometimes things like a board or something can warp if it gets a little bit wet, but it's archival, and they're just great to work with. But the linen for me is a really important thing. It's a great surface. It doesn't suck up the paint, and it comes in a variety of textures. So there's different kinds of easels that you can use. This is what's called a pochade box. They come in a lot of different forms. There's also a big French easel, which is a wooden easel that has foldable legs. That's been used for many, many years, but it's a little heavier than I wanted to have for this type of an event. I do have some French easels when I want to do something big. Set that up. And then Gloucester easels are, it's like a big triangle, and you would set your big painting on that. You see that more in some of the historic paintings. People who were set up painting from life using these big easels. They're pretty efficient, and that you can hold a big painting, but I typically don't paint that big. This is one of the biggest plein air paintings I've done on location, so I don't typically work that big because of the time that I have to do so quickly. My Joe does bigger than that. It's kind of an animal. So. All right. And then linen panels, oil paints. This is a prismatic palette, we call it. And in short, what that means is it helps you to capture images or capture things as they go off in the distance. And I won't get into that because that's a 3-hour talk. But basically, these are the paints that I use following the rainbow, essentially. Yellow, orange, all the way down. And so this is the group of colors that I use. Typically, I might throw in a couple other ones, but that's pretty much it. And this is what I was taught when I went through 2 classes. I continue to do it. So, I think we have time for a little demonstration.
Yes,
Good.
yes,
Excellent.
please.
Lights on?
Yes, please. Wow, this is great. There's a light on there. It's gonna work. So what I'm going to talk through is, this will take about 15 minutes. Try to do a whole painting in 15 minutes. Because I'm going to move really quickly, and I'm not going to care as much about drawing as I normally would, but I want to teach you the process that I go through. I've already sketched it on here, and I'm I'm not gonna tell you what it is, but I'll let it kind of emerge, and then you can say, I know what it is. Maybe you can tell already. Can you see what it is? Okay, all right, that's all right. So I'll be doing an underpainting, which we call a Payne's gray painting. What's really great about that is it lays all the shadows in using a combination of white, cobalt blue, and black in varying degrees. And it lays the drawing in, it tells you where the shadows are, in case they move because they're going to, and it tells you the relative darkness, which tells you a lot about atmosphere. So I'll start with that right now. And if you have any questions, feel free to just yell them out. Fairly quickly.
You thinning with linseed oil?
Yeah, it's a combination of linseed oil and turp, 50-50. So I'm looking for kind of a middle value here. It's too light. My proclivity is usually to be too light. Let's try this one. That's just to get it moving.
Do you prefer a typical kind of brush?
These are bristle brushes, often hog hair, and I like them because they're stiff enough and they hold up to paint well. Yet you can get some pretty nice small features.
How do you clean the brushes?
Typically, well, there's a couple different things you can do. I'll just step back on occasion so you guys can see what's going on here. Typically terps, and I use, as you can smell, I'm not using regular turpentine because it would fill the room. And so I use odorless turpentine or Gamsol. Those are the kind that typically used because they have lower VOCs. They still have some issues, so you got to be careful with them. And I don't typically have an open container of that. I just use it for cleaning brushes and then 50-50 on medium. Blue. So I'm gonna get that. Moving much quicker than I normally would, but hopefully you'll still get a sense of what this is about. Any thoughts on what this is? I'll give you a hint. I'm from Iowa.
Cornfield.
That is really helpful.
Mother's from Iowa.
That's right. That's right. He was born here.
So your goal at this point is to just get in all the darks.
All the shadows. That's right. So what's great about this is, as you heard, sometimes I'm working on a painting for 2 or 3 hours, and the light definitely changes in that 2 or 3 hours. A lot. And if I do this, then I don't have to chase the shadows. So can you tell now a little bit more what that is?
Tree with shadow, but I don't know what to do.
Okay, so essentially this is a hill going down. We've got a field off in the distance here, and these are trees that go off in the distance. As you go out further, this is going to be the top of those trees here, and then we've got some little fields here, and this is a cast shadow. What's kind of cool about this is in the process of doing this, you're describing not only where the shadow's falling, but what the thing is that it's falling on. So what can you tell me about that road?
Looks like it's got a nice ridge to it.
Yeah, it's got a little crown. It's a gravel road with a crown. The other thing that you find out is you pay attention to the fact that this is lighter than this. So the value of the painting process is really important because it tells you about the color and whether it's a cast thing or it's an upright shadow. This is really dark because it's hidden, the sun can't get to it. This is lighter because it's a gravel road, so it's a lighter thing that's getting the shadow. Then as you get up into this one, I could even kick this a little bit darker because this is now green and it's going to have a stronger shadow. So these some stronger shadows in here too. So this is something that I sometimes do, sometimes I don't. I like to color, but it's a really valuable and helpful process to go through to set up for painting and to help yourself by not chasing shadows. It's a little weird not painting in front. Then there's some other shadows kind of streaking across here. So once that's in there, the next thing I would do is I would go into a sky. And this one is going to be a nice summer sky. There's always a transition of sky. So where's the light coming from on this one? Can you tell? Yeah, from the right. So I'm going to keep that in mind when I'm doing my sky. Is I want the sky to feel like it's coming from the right too. So typically there's a transition that happens both from down and up, and then from the sky and away from the sky. So it's usually quite light at the bottom. And I move to darker. It's going to look kind of crazy at first. And I might even go darker still here. That's too dark. So I'm doing these in bands first. So when I get it down. This is a little bit too much of an exaggeration, but it will get better. These are really too small. So once I get everything in place, then I work to weave it all together. It's amazing the difference in a brush stroke. If I do a brush stroke this direction, the light doesn't catch it as much. If I do a brush stroke in this direction, see the difference? Yeah, it's a huge difference. Even after it dries, it looks wrong. So typically everything is a vertical brush stroke or a diagonal, except for water. For some reason, if you look real close on these things, when I do water, they're typically sideways because that's the way it reflects the light. If I do it vertical on the sky, it just it doesn't catch the light in the same way, and it works a lot better. So, and if I really want to pay close attention, I could actually bring in something like another color, just a little bit yellow in it. And I can bring that across. Really bring that sky sense, the sense of the sun into it. And for some reason, it works better to blend it than it does to try to paint or mix up that same color. So it's a bit exaggerated, but you get the idea of the intensity, of the intention of it. So then once the sky's in, then we start thinking about the colors. And just for the sake of showing what we've got, and since I've got a color that's kind of close to this, I'm going to mix up something that is like a gravel road, basically kind of bluish, white light. Get that in there so you get the sense of quicker, a lot quicker than I'm doing. There's probably a yellow cast to this that I could lay in over the top of that would give it some sense of play. Wherever I can, I look for opportunities to mix warms and cools because it gives your eyes some interesting things to look at. All right, so there's a gravel road, and now we got greens. And so the thing about the prismatic palette is it helps you make sense out of greens. Greens are super complicated. I mean, yes, it's blue and yellow, right? That's all there is to it. But the reality is when you go to trying to get a green, there's just thousands of types of greens. Sometimes it's, as you look out the window here, you have lots of greens here. And so it's a matter of looking at the green and saying, what is that particular green? Trying to capture that as much as possible. Sometimes you're making it with orange, sometimes you're making it with black. So I'm just going to look at one here. Feels like the top of a tree, big oak tree. And as you put this in and thinking about the character, and also then weave into the shadow. Just like that. All right, so now I've got a big tree. You can imagine it's hot July. Really, feels good to be under the tree. There's all this great coolness under there. And then there's a little bit of some underbrush here. That's why I painted that a little bit lighter blue, but I'm not going to give it much attention because I want your attention here. So anything up close is going to be rich and strong colors. As it gets further away, this is where the magic of the prismatic palette. Your shadows get lighter and bluer, and your anything in the sun loses yellow and gets lighter. To the point that when you get done with all these things marching back, this back here, your shadows and your lights all come together. And you got so that's kind of fun. So now when you're driving away from here and you get a good distance view, look at the trees as they go off in the distance. The shadow, I'll say that one more time. The shadows get lighter and bluer. And this really dark shadow here, as you can see, it's getting lighter and bluer, lighter and bluer, lighter and bluer. And then the stuff that is in the light, whatever color it is going to lose yellow. It's going to march its way down the prismatic palette and get lighter. Yeah, so then come together, just light blue at the end. As far as the greens are concerned, because we lose all this yellow. So if I'm good, that's what I'm going to do. That's the trick, is to pull it off. Now I'm going to mix up this green here, lighter, and different kinds of yellow, a little bit more blue than that. You're still pretty strong, but what you should see is it fall off here. Yeah, okay. It feels like those trees are a long ways away. So with not much work, I'm giving you the sense of a scene that has trees off in the distance. There happens to be a river behind here that comes back up to the field, so you can't see the river. And so now I'm going to go to these here just to give contrast. These are still kind of in the same area because they're fairly rich and they're close. So these I'm going to actually kick up and make them even brighter. So oftentimes these weeds are they're not as dark as let's say a tree. So that becomes strong. And of course, there's a lot of variety in there, things like that. This is a tree that growing out, kind of a weed type tree, variety of different types of things. This one's slightly different type of tree, or bush, weed. There's probably some stuff coming up here. It's not in the shadow. And now as I go off in the distance here, I'm going to cool these a little bit and march it down the prismatic palette. And this is all really subtle, but it makes a difference. Again, super quick, but you get the idea. Okay, I'm about 15 minutes in. You're getting the idea of what's going on. Now what I would do is I would look at the color of this scene, or this field, and get some of this in here too. And pay attention to the crop, whatever happens to be going on in the crops. Maybe there's a different thing that's a little bit redder back in here. And then here, it's back to farm fields. You know what I didn't do? Oops. The sky. Oftentimes, in the lower part of the sky, redness. So, this red is kind of sneaky at the bottom. So these you can just barely see green. So do you have, I think, let's move on. There's just a couple of slides left. as I think ahead about this program started going on, these are some of me talking to the future artists, and you can kind of carry this in. Have an all-wheel drive or a four-wheel drive truck or a car or something like that, because this time of the year I used it. Bring boots, because their hiking is fantastic, and to be prepared for bugs if you come up later. Know that there's studio space available. You guys put together such a beautiful studio. It's just great. So thank you for all that. I didn't happen to use it because my practice is to work from home as much as possible. That's great. It's a really great thing to have. Bake bread. Why not? And then the local establishments are fantastic, and see as much of the area as possible. So, surprising discoveries. So, that's it. So in conclusion, this has really been a wonderful experience for me. Really enjoyed it. And, I'm very appreciative and thankful for all the work that went into creating this, and many people involved in this. And I hope it's a good launch for the future of this program. And this place is just, it's singular, it's gorgeous, and it's fascinating, all the different elements of it. And I think you probably all know that. And so I come away with this and see the history, this rich history that this place has, and that it's worth protecting. So thank you. Any questions?
My memory is perfect. When you and I worked together 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You came up to Grand Marais.
You're good. September, yes, so the plein air convention, or plein air, Grand Marais plein air. There's a big competition for people who can paint throughout September, and then get you the dates on it. But yes, there's a competition. I'll be there again this September. And
You always paint the same scene?
No,
Everybody?
No, you have all of Cook County to paint. And so you can go anywhere in Cook County, and then at the end of the week, you come together, and there's a judging and a competition and a sale. And it's 60 competition painters plus 10 to 40 open class painters. So it's a really cool week. Great question.
I have a really silly question. Okay, so you bring that backpack out, the rain comes, how do you protect your painting? I mean, you shove it in the backpack.
Great question. That's not silly at all.
You should see his shirt.
Yeah.
This is a wet panel carrier.
Okay.
So it is.
Okay.
Open it up, and you can slide your painting in these little slots. And it enables you to take a wet painting from wherever, and it's made with this corrugated plastic. Weight, fairly rugged, and you can carry 6 paintings and 5 paintings in here.
Awesome. Thank
So,
you.
great question. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, other questions?
I'm interested in your etching technique that you're doing at home. What kind of acid do you use? The eco-friendly one or old school?
Yeah. I haven't looked at it forever. I'll find that out. Yes. It's
She wants to know your address, so she.
I'm not driving down there to print it.
Who wants to paint? Okay, who wants to paint more now? Anybody else want to try it? Yeah. Great. Awesome. Yeah. Let's. Oh gosh. All of them are great, honestly. I love painting in all the seasons. Preference-wise, it kind of depends where you are. I think it's, I love painting in winter because the shadows are gorgeous. There's blue and there are all these different colors. So I paint through the winter, not as often. But fall colors are tricky because unless you're really careful, they can be too gaudy. They don't look right. And so I would say for me, spring, summer is probably the most my favorite. It's get to a lot of variety. Although in Minnesota you get greens and trees and blue and water, and it's a lot of green and blue. So but yeah, good question.
Practiced for how many years?
Yeah, 11 years I studied with Jeff.
That was meeting once a week or?
Thursday nights is when he taught his class. I took classes 2.5 years with another guy, Jeff Renko, and that was more Flemish style, where you're doing underpaintings and real thin glazes, still life, figure, portrait. But then he didn't teach any landscape. So Joe
paintings be available for purchase at some point?
They are right now. Good question. Yeah, I got a price list over here, and I can let you know sizes, but most of them are 9 by 12s. These are 12 by 16s, the 3, and then this is 18 by 20, 16 by 20. So those are.
Bill Douglas, want to say a couple words?
Yeah. I guess, boy, are we lucky to have someone
Yes.
like Jack come up here. You see, he's a special person, and he's not only talented, he's a really good guy. And we'd be forever grateful for him for coming up. Holds a special place in our heart as our first artist in residence, so forever. Big thanks to Jack for being here. I'd also like to thank the Glenflint Trail community for the support it gives to the Historical Society. Without that support, things like this don't happen. Our wonderful staff, all the programs we have all summer go on because of the support of this community. In fact, we'd like to get your support to maybe buy one of Jack's paintings to have in our collection at the museum as the first artist in residence here. So if you're in a mood, we'll welcome your participation. So thanks again, everybody, for coming, and enjoy the rest of the summer, and thanks again to Jack.
And I'm gonna say the etchings aren't for sale because they're just not ready. But please take a look.
It's all about the AV, you know?
Got any other games to get to?
Yeah.